Was death better than bondage?
Buried me in the ocean with my ancestors that jumped from the ships. Because they knew death was better than bondage.
What's going on? I'm Adrian Long. Welcome to my series I'm calling Surviving the Start, Black Americans in Slavery. I'll be talking about slavery during Black History Month, which I know is not our favorite topic to talk about, but we don't talk enough about it because we don't have a real substantive understanding as a collective of what happened to us and how those things have shaped our being in the country today. And today I want to talk about Margaret Garner. Margaret Garner was an enslaved person born in the 1830s in the Kentucky area. And January 27th, 1856, Margaret Garner and her husband decided that they were going to leave slavery. They ran away from slavery and started their journey in Cincinnati, Ohio, where they were planning to follow the Underground Railroad to escape to freedom in Canada. And they first stopped at Joseph Kite's house, who was also a formerly enslaved person that sued for his own freedom and ended up purchasing his children and wife out of slavery as well. But they stopped there and ultimately were captured by their enslavers and taken back into slavery in Kentucky. However, before they were recaptured, Margaret sliced the throat of her 2-year-old and killed that child and attempted to kill the other children. And a white man was shot in all the commotion, as reported by the New York Times in 1856. Ultimately, Margaret stood trial in later that year in 1856, but not for what the abolitionist lawyers who were on her side argued for murder or for conspiracy to murder with other family members or for anything that would be related to the crime that a human could commit, but for damage to property, which is one of the ways the judicial system reinforced slavery as a concept by upholding this belief or this idea that Black people were less than human. And ultimately, Margaret was convicted for the damage to the property and was confined back to slavery because ultimately the court found that she didn't have any rights, or there was no rights recognizable to her as a mother, as a wife, as a person, and that the only thing that was damaged was essentially the property value that the owners of Mrs. Garner and her family had lost with her killing the one child that she did get to. So when they were eventually sold back into slavery, on the commute back there to Kentucky, they were commuted by ship. There was a collision with the ships, and one of the children, ultimately, her and the child fell overboard into the water. One of the children drowned underwater, and she would die just 2 years later of typhoid fever. Reportedly, her last words to her husband were, "Live in the hope of freedom." In 1858, little did she know freedom would come there shortly after. But it begs the question, is death better than bondage? It makes me think about that quote at the end of Black Panther. And also, if you're interested in reading more about this story in particular, the New York Times published an article highlighting people that they overlooked throughout time called Overlooked, and it talks about this story. And also the novel, Beloved by Toni Morrison, is based loosely on this story, but it tells the perspective of the dead child to come back and question the mother, to ask her, how could she decide that death was better than living for her? I wonder what you think and what your thoughts are. Do you think that she was right? And I mean, obviously none of us could ever really know the atrocities or the pain those people lived through in slavery, and to have to even live with freedom would come shortly thereafter, right? But the life that they lived and what freedom looked like in this country and the perpetual fight that we're engaged in today, do you think that death was better than bondage or the prospect of bondage? I don't know.